thousands that he covered. Now he hopes it will make you think about reporters. He's asking for 6 to 8 minutes for his speech.
No, 8 to 10.
Oh, 8 to 10. Oh, okay. Let's welcome Terry Spencer.
It was 7 years ago today, at about 2:40 in the afternoon, that I received a phone call that forever changed my life. I was working from home, and it was from my then editor at the Associated Press. Hey, how far are you from Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School? I don't know, 20 minutes. Why? I think everybody here now knows the why. Mr. Toastmaster of the Day, honored dignitaries, fellow Toastmasters, and most welcome guests. I am not here to retell how that evil bastard murdered 14 students and 3 staff members that day. I did that once before in some detail and left some people uncomfortable. I'm not here to talk about how he was able to legally buy 10 guns, even though he had a long history of bizarre and sometimes violent behavior. I'm not here to talk about his trial, or whether he should have gotten a death sentence or not. Those could all be topics for another day. Instead, I'm going to be a bit selfish. I'm going to talk about how the shooting, the aftermath, and the trial affected me. Because it hit me hard. It still does. I think about it every day. I don't think about my wedding every day. I don't think about the birth of my son every day. I don't think about the death of my parents every day. I don't think about any of the other thousands of stories that I did every day. But Stoneman Douglas, it's there. It's always there, just ready to pop up at any moment. It's there when I visit a school or even drive past one, and I start thinking about how a shooter could circumvent the security that they put in since the massacre. It's there when I go into a classroom and I start looking around for the Code Red poster that I know is going to be on a wall someplace. It's there if I go into a mall or a restaurant or any other public place, and I start thinking about where a shooter could come from and where I could go. Those thoughts weren't there 7 years ago. So why don't I talk about it? Well, partly because I have never wanted, then or now, anyone's sympathy. I volunteered to be a journalist, and with that comes you have to cover tragedies, big and small sometimes. The parents, the families, the surviving students and teachers, the police officers and paramedics who had to run into that building minutes after the shooting, the doctors who treated the wounded and did the autopsies. They deserve that much more than I do. I am well down the list. But it's also because while I grew up in Los Angeles, my parents were from Nebraska. And they were that stereotypical stoic Midwesterners. We did not do public displays of emotion. Oh, you might get away with a little bit of public happiness or even a little anger, but the stopwatch was always ticking. And any public display of sadness, particularly for oneself, no. Just suck it up. I never even called the Associated Press's mental health line, which was run by a contracted company. Partly because, well, I was never convinced that it was actually confidential. It's supposed to be, but none of my colleagues thought it was either. We always had the suspicion that it was getting back to the bosses. And the one thing you didn't want, even though the bosses were always verbally sympathetic, you didn't want them to think that you couldn't handle the biggest stories because, well, that could be a career ender. And also there was this other thing. you were limited to 7 phone conversations about any one event or crisis that you were having. Now, I always thought that weird, because if I was out on a story and I fell down and broke my leg severely, they wouldn't have limited me to 7 trips to the physical therapist. But if a story breaks your brain, 7 phone calls should do it. And if it doesn't, oh well. So that wasn't worth the hassle. So I got really good at suppressing my emotions, particularly during the trial. Because you see, I had to stay professional for the people involved in the trial, for the parents who were there every day, for my colleagues on Media Row, and most especially for my readers, because I had to stay focused so I could tell them what people said and what evidence was given. So I only came close to losing it twice. The first time wasn't during some testimony from some student or teacher talking about watching somebody getting murdered. It wasn't when I had to watch the video of the shooting or see the horrific crime scene photos and autopsy photos. No, it happened during a victim impact statement by the father of 14-year-old Alyssa Al-Hada. He was talking about how sometimes he got jealous or even a little bit angry when he would overhear his colleagues at work talking about doing something with their children. And then he just cried, "I will never dance with my daughter at her wedding." The other time happened on the day where myself and 4 other reporters went through the building where the shooting occurred. You might recall that they kept that building up for years, so during the trial, the jury could go through it. It was kept just like it was the day after the shooting. So after the jury went through it, they brought myself and the other reporters in. I didn't lose it when I saw the blood splattered on the floor, or the splatter on the walls, or the bullet holes. I didn't lose it when I went into classrooms and I saw the textbooks just still sitting open on a desk with notes next to them, or the overturned tables, or the wilted Valentine's roses and balloons on the floor. I didn't lose it when I went into teacher Scott Beagle's classroom and I saw the papers he was grading just minutes before he was shot and killed protecting his students. I didn't lose it when I went into the study hall and saw the chess game that Peter Wang was playing moments before his brain was blown to bits. It wasn't until I got back to the courthouse, after I filed my story, after I did a 15-minute television interview about what we had seen. It was when I was looking at some video of the things that I had missed while doing all those other things when they come back and resume the trial. It was a video of athletic director Chris Hickson's adult son. This is a young man who has some severe intellectual disabilities, but he was talking about his relationship with his dad the best he could. And he talked about how every Sunday they would go get a donut. And then he just cried, "I miss him." If I would have been alone at that moment, I would have been a puddle on the floor. But I wasn't, so I wasn't. So why am I up here today talking about this? Partly for some self-reflection. Valentine's Day means one thing to 99.999% of the people, and rightfully so. It used to mean that to me, but not anymore. Although I can still fake this other part really well. Ask my wife. But also because I want to ask a favor that I can ask, I think, now that I'm sort of retired. And it's this. The next time there's a disaster or a tragedy, and you're watching it on TV or looking at the pictures or reading about it, I want you to think about the victims and their families and their community and the first responders. But somewhere down the line, think about the journalists who brought you that coverage. They are human too, even if sometimes we try not to be. Mr. Toastmaster.